Welcome to my screencast video, the resource creation assignment 2. So this screencast is about nanomaterial classification. So before I go into the topic, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about what I did in my resource creation assignment 1 and how I envisage it linking with my current video. So very quick recap of what I did in research creation assignment 1. As part of the out of class activity, students were asked to watch a video on the construction of dye sensitized solar cell, and that was followed by a quiz to gauge how much of the video content the students had internalized. And as the in-class activity, a TPS was laid out, wherein students firstly had to list the constituents or the materials that went into the creation of a dye sensitized solar cell. And in the pair phase of TPS, along with the pair, the students had to explore the chemistry that was happening in the DSSE. And in the share phase, probably along with the help of the teacher, the students had to come up with the chemical equation depicting the chemistry underlying the DSSE mechanism. Okay, and also as a recap, the two main nanomaterials that went into the the creation of a dye sensitized solar cell were firstly the ITO film, the coating of ITO that was obtained on glass that was nano-sized. So if you recall, I had said that ITO was chosen because it has high optical transparency and is a good and displays good electrical conductivity. So that's my nanomaterial number 1, and of course the important nanomaterial in DSSE is titania. So my resource creation assignment 2, the current video, this, like I said, is about the nanomaterial classification, and my learning objective here is that at the end of this video, students should be able to categorize both ITO and titania under a specific nanomaterial type, and of course with the justification as to why are they pegging ITO and titania into this specific nanomaterial type. So with that said, let me take you through this slide. This set of images on the left here, these are some images of ITO thin films obtained on the surface of glass. So like you can see here, these depict ITO thin film SEM images as a function of different tin proportions ranging from 0 to 30 weight percentage. And I should also mention that this ITO thin film on the surface of glass was obtained using jet nebulizer spray pyrolysis technique. But that's probably the secondary thing here. The primary thing, as you can see here, is that the surface morphology is rather uniform and there are no kinks or voids or cracks in the surface. And that's important because we need ITO to display good electrical conductivity and optical transparency on the surface of glass. Otherwise it would be just, it would belie the purpose of using ITO over here. Right, moving on to the right of the slide, this image on the top here is the SEM image of titania from the Great Cell Lab. So as you can see, titania nanoparticles in the form of spheres, about 500 to 800 nanometers in size. And these two sets of images over here, these are AFM and SEM images of titania nanomaterials in the form of films. So the point I'm trying to make here is that depending on the fabrication technique, the same nanomaterial can be obtained in different morphologies, different structures, and so on and so forth. Sorry. So let's assume you have synthesized a nanomaterial based on maybe a top-down method or a bottom-up method. What are you going to do with that? Of course, the objective would be to use it for some purpose, but the point I'm trying to make here is when you have some nanostructured material, you want to classify that into one particular type. Because as scientists, we want to classify materials in our bid to understand the life, the universe, and everything around us, because that makes life easier. So how do we classify nanomaterials? So this is how it's done, like you see over here. Nanomaterials are classified into three different types: zero-dimensional nanomaterials, one-dimensional nanomaterial, and two-dimensional nanomaterials. Representative examples from each type are listed over here. What I'll do is I'll come back to the examples later, but first I'll try to define what these nanomaterial types are. So starting off with zero-dimensional nanomaterials. These are materials in which 0 dimensions are not in the nanoscale, which would mean all the dimensions are in the nanoscale. Moving on to one-dimensional nanomaterial, these are materials in which one dimension is not in the nanoscale, which would mean two dimensions are in the nanoscale. Likewise, for two-dimensional nanomaterials, these are materials in which two dimensions are not in the nanoscale, which therefore means one of the dimensions is in the nanoscale. So as you can imagine, this mode of classification of materials into one-dimensional, two-dimensional, zero-dimensional is based on the number of dimensions that are not in the nanoscale. Quite a roundabout way of classifying something, but this works. So any material, as you can imagine, it has three dimensions, x, y, and z. So when we say zero-dimensional nanomaterial, again, zero dimensions not in the nanoscale, meaning all dimensions are in the nanoscale. So x, y, z, along these directions, this material is going to have its particles in size, let's say 1 to 100 nanometers. One-dimensional nanomaterial, one dimension not in the nanoregime, meaning two dimensions in the nanoregime. So let's say for nanowires, nanorods, and nanotubes, the length and the diameter is going to be in the nanoregime. And for two-dimensional nanomaterials, only one dimension is the nanoscale, and our representative examples here are nanocoatings, nanofilms, where the thickness is going to be in the nanoscale and the length and breadth, they can be in the microregime. So with that classification and its attendant definition, let's now go into the zero-dimensional nanomaterial types. So these are nanomaterials in which zero dimensions are not in the nanoscale, meaning all the dimensions are in the nanoscale. So representative examples of this type of nanomaterials are nanoparticles, nanoclusters, nanocrystals, and nanopowders. So let's start off with nanoparticles. These are amorphous or semicrystalline materials with the rigid restriction that their dimension should be larger than 10 nanometers. And when we say something, this size is larger than 10 nanometers, it's fairly easy to assume that there's going to be a rather large degree of polydispacity over here. Also, these can be single crystalline or multicrystalline, can be composed of single component or multi-component. And from an aesthetic point of view, the important thing about nanoparticles is that they exhibit various shapes and forms. And I think at this point it would be a good thing to mention about zinc oxide nanoparticles, which exhibit rather interesting morphologies like flowers and stars and spherical structures, so on and so forth, depending on what is the fabrication technique of the zinc oxide nanomaterial. Also, these zero-dimensional nanomaterials, these can exist individually, or they can be incorporated in the matrix, and they can be metallic, ceramic, or polymeric. So this is what I was telling you about zinc oxide nanoparticles, which can exhibit different shapes. Starting off with this same image on the right, here you can see zinc oxide nanoflowers, and this set of four micrographs on the left, here you see an evolution of nanoflowers starting off from nanospheres. And I should also mention that in this particular paper, this different morphologies are obtained as a function of heating conditions and also the coating that has been given onto the zinc oxide nanostructure. Okay, nanoclusters. So just like nanoparticles, these can also be amorphous or semicrystalline, but the condition here is that these definitely have to be smaller than 10 nanometers, which means they have a rather small narrow size distribution, or monodispacity is high in these type of nanomaterials. Nanopowders, these are agglomerates of nanocrystalline subunits, and this micrograph that you can see over here shows microscopic grains composed of nanoscale amorphous units. Nanocrystals, these are single crystalline nanomaterials, and depending on their size, if their size is less than 10 nanometers, these could be called nanoclusters, and if their size is more than 10 nanometers, they could be called nanoparticles. And because these are crystals, they have an ordered lattice array. A special type of nanocrystal is a quantum dot, which could for the moment be defined as a nanocrystal that is made of semiconductors. Examples of quantum dots would be cadmium selenide and cadmium telluride quantum dots. So I'll stop with this in this particular video, and I'll see you in the next video as we move on into the one-dimensional and two-dimensional nanomaterials.